good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And welcome to the launch of the 2025 Climate Technology Progress Report, Advancing Bio-Based Technologies in the Bioeconomy. My name is Sarah Traerup, and I'm the Head of Technology here at the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. I will be moderating this event. We are very pleased to present you with the 2025 Climate Technology Progress Report that will take stock of where we are at in enabling climate technology development and transfer this year with a specific focus on bio-based technologies. Before we delve into the report, I'd like to just mention a few housekeeping guidelines. Please use the dedicated question function that you will see on your screen to submit any questions you may have to the speakers. And we'll take them up during the question and answer session after the presentations. You can submit questions right away and throughout the session. The session is being recorded and can be accessed afterwards through the website unepccc.org. The event will be a bit longer than 1 hour, and the last 15 minutes will be used for questions. So we'll start our program with an opening segment where we will have remarks from several distinguished guests. First, we'll hear from Martin Krause, who is the Director of the Climate Change Division at UNEP. Then we'll hear from the chairs of the two bodies of the technology mechanism under the UNFCCC, Stephen Minas, Chair of the Advisory Board of the Climate Technology Center and Network, and from Dietram Oppelt, who's the Chair of the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee. We are also looking forward to welcoming Pedro Ivo Ferraz da Silva, Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the COP30 presidency, to provide opening remarks. However, Pedro has fallen ill and will not be able to join us today. But in any case, we would like to extend a big thank you to Pedro for his engagement in the steering committee and throughout the production process of this year's report. And we wish him a speedy recovery. So immediately after we've heard our welcoming remarks, we will briefly introduce you to the overall framing of the report. We will have presentations of the findings and from the lead chapter authors. After this, we'll have a Q&A session. And please, our speakers are joining us from various parts of the world with various internet strengths. So if we have technical challenges, please bear with us. And I will present to you the rest of our speakers today after our opening segment. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Martin Krause to take the floor and provide opening remarks. Martin, please, the floor is yours.
Sarah, thank you very much for inviting me to join you here for the launch of the Climate Technology Report. Excellencies, colleagues, partners, you know, if we look at the global bioeconomy, what do we see? We see that the global bioeconomy is currently valued at around 4 to 5 trillion US dollars, with the potential to grow to 30 trillion US dollars by 2050. And that would make it a cornerstone of the global transition to a low carbon, to a climate resilient and a sustainable future. Aligning climate and biodiversity goals can simultaneously reduce greenhouse gas emissions and at the same time promote nature positive development, such as ecosystem restoration and sustainable resource use, while also generating cross-sectoral synergies and generating multiple development co-benefits. The 2025 Climate Technology Report that we are launching here today, right now, demonstrates how innovative and supportive policies are advancing the use of biomass, sustainable land practices, to drive climate action and to drive nature positive development. So the 2025 Climate Technology Progress Report emphasizes that localized innovation through bio-based technologies, leveraging regional resources and knowledge, can support sustainable production and innovation beyond the traditional industrial hubs. Bio-based technologies have cross-sectoral potential spanning bioenergy, bioplastic, food systems, natural fertilizers, and drawing on diverse knowledge and expertise from indigenous practices to innovative local solutions. Harnessing that localized knowledge drives innovation, enhances legitimacy, and supports bioeconomic transitions that are ecologically sustainable and socially just. So, what is it that we need to do? We need to upscale the implementation of effective bio-based technologies in our response to the climate crisis and to build resilient and sustainable economies. The urgency of getting climate technologies implemented on the ground cannot be overstated, in particular in light of the upcoming COP30 in Belém in Brazil. Bio-based technologies, including bioenergy, bio-based materials, and nature-integrated practices, offer significant climate mitigation and adaptation potential, but their feasibility varies across contexts and sectors. Expanding the adoption of bio-based technologies requires reducing costs, securing a reliable supply of raw materials, and establishing the necessary infrastructure and supportive policies. Achieving scale and equitable outcome depends on institutional feasibility, which differs from country to country, from sector to sector, and by context and technology as well. And that requires the alignment of national policies with climate finance and effective governance structures. So let's look at Latin America. Latin America and the Caribbean hold immense potential to lead in sustainable bioeconomy innovation, drawing on the region's rich biodiversity, on its strong agricultural systems, and also its vibrant indigenous knowledge. The LAC countries circular economy principles, and CTCN is supporting advanced bio-based technology strategies, providing regionally diverse data and establishing baselines to track progress and to track impacts. The 2025 Climate Technology Report highlights that advancing bioeconomy innovation in Latin America and the Caribbean relies on strong regional R&D platforms and public-private partnerships to develop and to transfer technologies. So lastly, advancing monitoring systems, integrating satellite-based MRV systems, geospatial analytics, and carbon accounting tools, all of these are crucial for tracking the results, for ensuring transparency in the implementation of the bio-based technologies. Colleagues, partners, in conclusion, the sustainable bioeconomy offers a transformative pathway for climate mitigation, for climate adaptation, and for inclusive development. Leveraging innovation combined with coherent policies and tailored finance can scale bio-based solutions with multiple environmental, social, and economic benefits. Synergies emerge when bio-based technologies are embedded within circular economic approaches, when they are connected to nature-based solutions and aligned with national development and climate strategies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin, for these words. We truly appreciate you joining us here today. So now I would like to turn to the two chairs of the UNFCCC technology mechanism, and I would like to kindly invite Chair of the Advisory Board of the CTCN, Stephen Minas, to take the floor. Stephen, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and hello to all colleagues, dear friends. It's a delight to be with you today to welcome into the world the latest Climate Technology Progress Report. This series has been gathering strength since 2022 and has quickly established itself as a landmark report on the climate calendar. alongside UNEP's reports on emissions and adaptation, of course. So I think it's important to celebrate this report and to recognize that we're also building upon the works of previous years and building a very rich store of knowledge for parties and other stakeholders. From the side of the CTCN, I would like to begin by acknowledging our partners in this report, of course, the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center and the TEC. This is a very rich, valuable partnership that, of course, the CTCN values greatly. And I'd like to particularly acknowledge and congratulate all of the authors who contributed to this report. It's quite a different skill writing as part of a team. It's a team effort. And I think we're very fortunate to have the authors who have given of their time to produce this landmark report. And I'm looking forward to hearing from some of them just a bit further on in this webinar. I'd also like to, of course, acknowledge the catalytic role of the COP30 presidency, of course, through our dear colleague Pedro, and add my best wishes to him for a very speedy recovery. So the theme of the report, of course, is indeed the bioeconomy. Now, Martin has already mentioned the size and the potential, the significance of the bioeconomy. I think that one of the other things that this report very significantly notes is that in many ways the Global South is leading in the bioeconomy and bioeconomy initiatives. And that's something which is worth acknowledging explicitly and indeed celebrating, but also building upon in a very practical way. And this report sets out some very practical ways to do that. And indeed, the convergence of the climate agenda with biodiversity, land use priorities does present an opportunity. And that opportunity, of course, finds us preparing for COP30, hosted by Brazil, a country of enormous ecological significance and wealth. And this is a pivotal moment. This report, I believe, will help to shape that moment, highlighting the strategies and the partnerships, the policies that can help us to bridge those climate and nature goals, which are equally important and equally pressing. The report highlights the key roles of both domestic policy, but also international cooperation and, crucially, financing as well. I think that this is a report that indeed makes a unique contribution, because there is a great deal of work and literature out there on these topics, but it is a contribution not least by examining technological progress through the lens of national systems of innovation. And this is a concept which is also central to the work of the CTCN in working with developing countries. So there is a natural advantage that the partners to this report have, that has been utilized to create this report's unique contribution. Each of the chapters would illustrate the value of the report, but I particularly found interesting some of the messages in the chapter on financing, which of course talk about targeted financial mechanisms, the need, the value of regulatory clarity, enabling access to carbon markets, tools such as green bonds, and sustainability-linked bonds, as well as, of course, technology innovation and technology research and development. These are all things to a greater and lesser extent that the CTCN can assist parties with. Some of the CTCN's bioeconomy projects have already been mentioned, but I would welcome perhaps those who are viewing this webinar in developing countries and who are concerned about these issues to also partner with and work with the CTCN. So ultimately, of course, the bioeconomy is about nature, but it is also about people. This report makes clear the significance of respecting social justice as well as environmental integrity as we deploy bio-based technologies. And this is, of course, something that the COP30 presidency also has as a very key message. So my expectation, colleagues, in closing, is that this report will be a practical resource for action. It's not another PDF which we're putting out there to gather virtual dust. It is immensely relevant to the practical work that countries have. The challenges, of course, are vast, but the opportunities of the bioeconomy are there for us to see. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for all of these words and also for supporting the report throughout the years from the early days in 2022. So thank you very much for that. We do appreciate it. So I would now like to invite Dietram Oppold, who is the chair of the Technology Executive Committee, to provide your remarks. Thank you, Dietram. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much, and very nice to be here together with the colleagues. And from my side, I also would very much like to congratulate for the report. This year's climate technology report is really at an important moment, especially as we are heading to COP30. It will contribute to the ambition of COP30 to raise the ambition through NDCs and a deeper integration across the different Rio Conventions, spanning from climate change to biodiversity and desertification. The 2025 edition of the report supports this direction by demonstrating how climate technologies can help to achieve climate goals, but also protect ecosystems and promote sustainable land use. It offers with this a timely insight to guide strategies for net zero emissions and climate resilience. This year's report places a special focus on the bioeconomy, which I know is at the heart of our colleagues in Brazil who are hosting COP30. And this is a powerful driver to climate action. It explores how innovative bio-based technologies can advance both mitigation and adaptation, while also aligning broader goals for biodiversity and sustainability. It highlights the tools, strategies, and partnerships needed to scale solutions, strengthen resilience, and support sustainable development. Ultimately, the report aims to inform policy, investment, and implementation efforts to accelerate the global transition towards the so much needed net zero future. For the Technology Executive Committee, this issue lies at the heart of our work. Our mandate is to advance the development and transfer of technologies and enable countries to meet their climate goals. Technologies that not only reduce emissions, but also build resilience and deliver co-benefits for nature, livelihood, and sustainable development. The growing recognition that climate and nature are inseparably challenges means that technology policy, innovation systems, and investment strategies must evolve together. Through its 2023 to 2027 rolling work plan, the TEC is contributing to UNEP's CCC's Climate Technology Progress Report series. In addition, the TEC prepared key messages and recommendations on the basis of the CTPR for 2023-22 and to 2023-23 for the COP29 and the CMA6. The TEC has played an important role in shaping the 2025 Climate Technology Progress Report together with the CDCN, the TEC strategic guidance for its participation in its steering committee. Moreover, the TEC will actively promote the report findings at key events, ensuring visibility among parties, stakeholders, and broader climate technology community. The TEC in its work treats bioeconomy as a cross-cutting enabler, spanning innovation, implementation, capacity building, and collaboration and support. This approach promotes nature-based solutions, green jobs, national bioeconomy strategies aligned with NDCs and net zero goals. Before I close, I would like to extend my heartfelt thank you to UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, UNEP CCC, and all others who dedicated immensely to this report, reviewers and contributors, whose experience and dedication made this report possible. Your work is helping shape more sustainable, resilient future for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dietram, and also thank you to the whole CTCN and tech teams for all the support and collaboration throughout the years and this year as well. So now we will move to the next segment of this launch, where we will hear from a number of presenters who are part of the lead author teams for each of the chapters in the report. So let me first introduce the speakers we have with us here today. The report, I should say, takes a global focus with some regional breakdowns throughout chapter 1 to 5, whereas chapter 6 zoom in on bio-based technologies and bioeconomy in Latin America and Caribbean region. But first we'll hear from my colleague Blanche Ting, who is an advisor on the climate, energy and innovation here at the Copenhagen Climate Center of UNEP. She will provide you with some context for this year's report. Then we'll move to Joni Jupesta, who is a research fellow at the Center for Transdisciplinary and Sustainability Science at the IPB University in Indonesia. Joni will share insights on what progress we are making on the adoption of bio-based technologies. We'll then have Deborah Lee, who is coordinator of NDC 3.0 and the National Climate Change Action Plan at the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources of Guatemala, together with Elizabeth Gilmore, Associate Professor at University of Carleton in Canada, to present on global and regional feasibility profiles of selected bio-based technologies. For the investment and finance chapter, we have with us Rocio Diaz-Chavez, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Environmental Policy, Imperial College London. Then to present on the chapter focusing on the role of institutions, governance and global cooperation, we have Francis X. Johnson, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute. Finally, we will have Alex Godoy-Founders, who is Associate Professor and Director at the Sustainability Research Center and Strategic Resource Management at University of del Desarrollo in Chile, to present the chapter that takes us into specific context of the Latin American Caribbean region. Before we move into the specific chapters, I would also like to mention all the people who have been involved and supported the process throughout early this year. I would like to express our appreciation to our 14 steering committee members and to the 41 lead and contributing authors who contributed to this year's report. We also have 28 reviewers who have supported through several reviews of the chapters. And of course, all our colleagues here at the center and in UNEP in general who have supported the process throughout. So now, without further ado, I would like to invite my colleague Blanche to take us through a short introduction to this year's report and provide some context of the topic. So Blanche, if you hear me, please take the floor and go ahead. Thank you. I see you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, everyone. So my name is Blanche, as my colleague was saying. I'm one of the editors of this report, together with my colleague Sarah. And my presentation today will outline the framing, the scope, as well as the main areas of focus in the report. At the very early stages of developing this year's report and in defining the theme for this year's upcoming milestones, particularly given the urgency of meeting the Paris Agreement goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, we take into consideration the COP30 that's taking place next month in Brazil, as we're all excited for that. We anticipate that COP30 will anticipate a strong focus on the synergies between climate action and nature. So with that in mind, the report was guided by innovative approaches that bring together technology as well as sustainable bio-based solutions. So these integrated synergies provide effective as well as affordable ways to advance both climate and nature objectives together. So next slide, please. In defining the scope of this report and through a lot of negotiations and consultations with experts, we decided to focus on the bioeconomy as an overall theme of this year's report. And by simple definition, the bioeconomy is essentially the utilization of renewable biological resources to produce goods and services. There's obviously an expanded definition in the report, so please feel free to read further. As drivers of the bioeconomy, we then looked at how to define the scope of the bioeconomy, given that the theme reflects the growing intersection of climate, nature, and technology. So in looking at the overall drivers, we consider the fact that there are 4 drivers essentially, which is the move away from fossil fuels to biomass alternatives, given that this is encouraged. Sorry, can you just go to the previous slides? So to narrow the scope of the report, we looked at 4 drivers of the biobased economy, which is essentially moving away from fossil fuels, a growing focus on CDR or carbon dioxide removal, especially in terms of BECCS, so bioenergy carbon capture and storage, the sustainable agriculture land use category, especially because this plays a key role in addressing both climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. And then lastly, downstream of the biobased value chain, which is essentially looking at resource efficiency of biomass utilization, as well as waste stream recycling. So next slide, please. So given these overall drivers, we then looked at the selection of 4 key, what we call climate technology categories. One is being the biomass conversion. So for example, biomass to gas, to liquid, to solid fuels. The second one is the biogenic carbon capture and utilization and storage. So for example, BECCS. We take note that BECCS has been one of the more advanced options that were used in the recent IPCC assessment reports, but we specifically highlight in this year's climate technology reports to take into consideration other biologically based approaches of CDR. So this will also be mentioned in chapter 2. Then sustainable agriculture and land use is a 3rd category, for example, afforestation and reforestation. And then the 4th one is bio-based material, for example, bioplastics. So in conclusion of my presentation, it is important to note that these 4 categories are not exhaustive. Other areas such as, of course, biochemical manufacturing, biomining, bioelectronics, all of these offer potential climate benefits, but we also have to take into consideration that some of these fall beyond the scope of the report. So this year's report focuses on technological pathways that are currently most policy relevant, scalable, as well as established in advancing low carbon, climate resilient outcomes within the bioeconomy. Thanks, Sarah. I'll hand over to the next chapter.
Thank you very much for providing us with some more context, Blanche. So without further ado, I would like to invite Joni to present some findings on the technology adoption and reflections from the chapter. Please, Joni, go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. We will share our finding on the chapter 2, the adoption of bio-based technology. Next slide, please. So this is the diagram of the biomass convection technology. This is to show actually the biomass can go into 3 pathways. One is to the gas stage, and then to bioliquid such as biodiesel, bioethanol, and then the biomass also can be solid fuel, for example, biochar using for heat and power. So the biomass basically can go into different pathways, depend on the cost and also availability of the technology in certain country. For example, the most mature technologies is anaerobic digestion, the biogas from the biomass waste. But however, there are also very emerging technology such as gasification. But this is still in emerging stage, and this is energy and capital intensive, and also very highly related with the feedstock quality. And of course, when we talk about the biomass to solid liquid, this is traditionally the developing country use a lot of the biomass. For example, the wood residue for cooking and so on. However, there are another technology to make it more high carbon, high energy content. For example, torrefaction, slow pyrolysis, and hydrothermal carbonization. This is reduce the moisture and then increasing the heat value. Next slide, please. Then now we are talking about the emerging technology, for example, the bioenergy, carbon capture and storage. This is like the CCUS now becoming very highly discussed in energy sector. And one example for the CCUS its application is the BECCS, the bioenergy carbon capture and storage is considered as the prominent because this is permanence. They can store the CO2 in large scale and also in very long-term time. So, however, there are also another unintended consequence. For example, the biomass availability. The bikes also need a lot of land area, and also they are in need of infrastructure to do the capture the CO2, and also another thing storage, and also another thing to transport the CO2 itself. However, BECCS is only one of the big area of the bio-based CDR approach. There are also another CDR, for example, afforestation, reforestation, agroforestry, improved forest management, biochar and soil carbon sequestration in grassland and also in pasture. So currently, 2 million tons of the CO2 already captured annually, mostly from bioethanol processing plant, and the existing bio-CCUS effort is very far from what expected to become net zero. The figure below is to show actually several of the mitigation potential in afforestation, reforestation. The possibility is medium to high, and improved forestry management can mitigation potential per year 0.44 gigaton to 6.61. Another one thing to highlight is peatland, 1.1 to 2.6, and also of course the cheapest one is just using the soil carbon sequestration, organic fertilizer and so on in grassland and pastureland, 2.38 until 7.47 gigaton CO2 per year, the mitigation potential. However, there are another technologies such as seaweed, seagrass, mangrove, biochar, agroforestry also need to improve. So there are so many pathways for the biomass based carbon dioxide removal. Next slide, please. Another thing need to highlight is about the sustainable agriculture and land use technology. In particular, developing countries, this is highly relevant. For example, afforestation and reforestation offer the highest mitigation potential, but as you already know, not every country has land availability, and also this is very prone with the disaster. For example, the forest fire. Due to the increasing temperature, so in summertime, they are highly probability to get the forest fire, as you already aware in certain part of the world. And also variability in carbon sequestration also matter, because every tree has different carbon sequestration capability. And the other thing need to highlight is about the biochar. The biochar is very limited. However, many people thinking biochar in medium term could be one of the distinguished CDR component, because biochar can protect carbon sinking and also helping biodiversity and land use strategy more efficient. Compared with afforestation and reforestation, biochar can store the carbon in longer time, 30 to 100 years, depend on how the biochar produced. So in short way, the CDR also impact with some environment issue, for example, the water cycle, because large-scale afforestation, and then somehow more study will be needed to assess if you implement the CDR in large scale. This technology also can hopefully able to have co-benefits such as food security, improving livelihood, and also supporting climate resilience. Next slide, please. And this is last but not least, bio-based material from the waste. So many, if you use the wood several times, so this is become waste. But this is still value. For example, the wood chip can be used for energy, the biomass, agriculture residue, and this will be reduced. If you use as the energy source, you can reduce your demand for the fossil fuel, and also you can cut emission indirectly, and also some of the the waste product you can use for carbon storage. And also you can, by doing this thing, you use the waste, you can support to more circular economy, regenerative, and also you can improve the material system in better way. So this new biomass material is getting momentum because now in the trend, many company like to use the bio-based material in their construction, when you're building the house, because the cement has emit a lot of CO2 in production. So many developer in real estate, they use the wood material in their construction to reduce cement utilization. This is to reduce overall carbon footprint. So that means the innovations such as hempcrete and biochar infused in the concrete can improving the carbon storage. However, most applications still in the linear model. This is not massive scaling, and this is still sporadic, and this is still used in small scale by certain interest of the company. But we need scaling to establish an emerging material to make it wider up utilization, and also this will be improved regenerative land use practice, and also will be helpful for the sustainable sourcing by using the recycled material. And also we need also public acceptance. Next slide, please. So in overall, the summary, the bioenergy, biomass convection, and biogenic carbon technology are all has keep improving across gas, liquid, and also solid application. And the nature is, for example, the biogas anaerobic digestion, and biochar already become emerging solution. And also the other thing is like gasification hydrogen, and also emerging bioenergy carbon capture and storage. However, to scaling this, we need all this emerging, we need to aware they are constrained by high cost, limited of the infrastructure, and the need for supply and to guarantee the supply chain of the biomass. The nature-based and biological-driven CDR such as afforestation, agroforestry, and soil carbon sequestration can improve the carbon by offering the co-benefit. They are another. We are not only talking about climate change, but also they are bring opportunity in biodiversity improvement, and also increasing the job for the livelihood, the community base. But this is need public support. We need policy integration. The policymaker has to make this as in the long-term national planning, and also this is need also carefully land use planning, because this is all related with the land utilization. Lastly, bio-waste material and climate smart agriculture are expanding. Border adoption is depend on the circularity. We have to utilize the sustainable sourcing, not from deforestation, and also we have to support the governance regulatory framework. Thank you. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Joni, for sharing some insights on where we're at with different bio-based technologies and their adoption. So with this, we would like to turn to the next chapter, where we would like to invite you, Debbie and Elizabeth, to provide insights on the feasibility of deployment and scaling of bio-based technologies. So please, Debbie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you to everybody, and good day. So as you might know, the feasibility assessment has been a key part of the Climate Technology Progress Report since 2022, following the multidimensional feasibility assessment methodology developed in IPCC 6 assessment cycle, starting from the special report on global warming at 1.5C, in which we look beyond just the technology and economic dimensions, but also look at institutional, social, culture, environment, and geophysical. So with that, I'm just going to start with a few key messages of the chapter, and then show some of the feasibility results. So I'm going to start by saying that based on this multidimensional feasibility assessment, the best feasibility results show that bioenergy and biomass strategies need to be pursued as part of an inclusive, just, and low emission transition that aligns with the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. We also saw linkages in support of Indigenous peoples and marginalized communities that, of course, depend on how these different technologies are being implemented. And we did an assessment at the global level, but for many of the technologies, we also looked at regional variations, specifically for Africa and Latin America. And we focus more on Africa and Latin America because in developing economies, there is an urgent need to transition from traditional biomass to cleaner, modern bioenergy pathways that align with climate resilient development. So here we also look at the different scales that can go from briquettes to more of like the bio-based materials and other fields. But still talking about developing economies in the focus in rural areas. We also looked at simple and decentralized bioenergy technologies that involve, for example, biogas and proof cook stoves that have a high feasibility and have strong co-benefits also with health and livelihoods, which also align with the sustainable development goals. But this also needs to achieve scale and equitable outcomes that highly depend on institutional feasibility into where the different frameworks, national policy frameworks and climate finance mechanisms that other colleagues will talk about later. But we also see that the bioeconomy encompasses a broad spectrum of bio-based technologies, as Blanche explained in her presentation, and each feasibility profile is different here in this case. But again, it depends on context, scale, and feedstock. Something that we found, for example, is that biogas from waste streams offers strong synergies across mitigation, adaptation, and the sustainable development goals. And there is a stark difference between the first generation biofuels that raise more land use, biodiversity, and food security concerns than the second generation options that have an improved environmental performance, although cost and logistics still remain challenges. Waste-based biogas stands out still as the most viable of the assessed bioenergy technologies and also has a strong mitigation and adaptation synergy along with strong socioeconomical co-benefits. Advanced biofuels like algal biofuels and biohydrogen hold long-term promise, but currently are constrained by high costs and low technical readiness, although if we do this assessment in a few years, maybe medium term, this will change. Of course, there's still different land use pressures and sustainability concerns. And finally, integrating bioenergy technologies into broader energy systems is essential for enhancing climate resilience and energy security. Here, our assessment focused in part on the dispatchability and system integration potential of solid, liquid, and gaseous bioenergy to enable flexible storage, logistics, and blending with existing infrastructure. So as we can see here, the assessed bio-based technologies focus first on biomass conversion for rural context in developing countries, mainly looking at the energy poverty part, also looking at sustainable agriculture and land use at a regional level, and finally on bio-based materials. So when we look at the feasibility assessment results, first for mitigation, we see an overall feasibility as high for example, biogas. For the rest of the technologies, we see a mix of high, medium, and low. But if we look specifically across the different dimensions, the institutional dimension is still a challenge, a bigger of a challenge, especially when we look at what are the different policy frameworks and regulations that are needed. The economic one is still of a challenge in some of the cases, but also when we look at the environmental part, it again focuses on the scale. In some cases, a smaller scale doesn't put so much pressure and competition on land, food, and water, whereas when we go to a higher scale, it does. And when we go to the feasibility assessment for adaptation, we find the same, especially for the institutional dimension, that has more of the medium, low and medium feasibility. We can see more stronger on the technological side and environmental, ecological, also looking at the dual role that the bioeconomy has for mitigation and adaptation. And while, yes, there is a lot of evidence of the emissions reduction potential, we can see how some of these technologies also help build resilience, which again depends on the appropriate enabling conditions that my colleagues will speak about. And I know these graphs are probably small and very complex to digest just in this short presentation, but we have broken them down in global and regional tables when you can see the chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for elaborating on the results of the feasibility assessment. And I would encourage our participants to have a closer look in the report, which includes a lot of interesting details. So with this, I would like to invite Rocio to share with us findings from the financing and investing in bio-based technologies chapter. So please, Rocio, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and I want to acknowledge my co-authors in this chapter. So I would like to start also introducing what is the current financial state of the bioeconomy. So if you could move to the first slide, please. So what we found out is that the bioeconomy at this point has been valued between 4 to 5 trillion US dollars, but it is projected to reach 30 trillion by 2050. So this could be really a big opportunity for achieving sustainable development, job creation, and environmental resilience. But we have to consider that for this potential, we need to include all the effectiveness and available financial mechanisms that support innovation and investment across these different bio-based sectors, including agriculture, forestry, bioenergy, and biotechnology. We also need to consider that target funding is necessary for capital-intensive and high-risk technologies. Blended financial approaches are also needed, especially for grants and venture capitals, public-private partnerships, carbon markets, and other types of results-based payments. Considering transition finance tailored to move from these bio-based industries from pilot to an industrial scale, platform-based mechanisms to aggregate the small projects into portfolios that can be investable, and integration of circular economy and just transition criteria in financial instruments. We can see in the next figure that different financial mechanisms already exist to target or to focus on certain technologies within the bioeconomy. They range from venture capital, blended finance, government grants, subsidies, green bonds, sustainable linked finance, carbon marks and credits, public-private partnership, but also now coming crowdfunding and impact investment. And that also includes DFIs and multilateral funding. So this is development finance institutions and multilateral funding that in the next figure, we can see that all of them can come together into blended finance, putting together the public and private investors into these different types of biomass and bioeconomy technologies. So from different types of conversion technologies to carbon sequestration and utilization, examples that we have already heard, sustainable agriculture and land use, and also bio-based materials. We know also that there are already some existing financial mechanisms, such as nature-based financial mechanisms, payments for ecosystem services that are aligned with the bioeconomy goals, carbon biodiversity stacking, also combining credits that are also aligned with the bioeconomy goals. And we found also different types of examples of these investments. For instance, carbon capture projects in in the Kyrgyzstan Republic with nearly 30 million grant for investment in this type of projects. So Ethiopia with around $37 million also with investment on carbon capture projects. Durable carbon dioxide removal projects that have been already for more than 500 and more than 28 million tons captured since 2020. They include BEX, biochar, and other examples that with subsidies that they can also register around $130 to $180 per ton of carbon. Then forest wood and wood products. For instance, the Global Forest Finance Pledge, since COP26, they have public donors that have committed around $10 to $13 billion. And now blended finance and sustainability linked funds, for instance, in the case of Brazil with Natura investing more than 1 billion reals in the region of the Amazon. So this also moves us to consider that there are still financing challenges. So they include high initial cost and risk, as it has been explained through the different technologies. Also, lack of commercial viability. Many of them are still at pilot scale. The regulatory and policy uncertainty that make investors doubt about investing in this area if there is not a consistent policy that supports it. Also, the challenges in market integration and the limited public funding in the global south. We also found that there are different types of financial actors in the next figure that we classify them as global north and global south, but they range from banks to government subsidies to government agencies and multilateral agencies also working in different regions around the world that are described also in the report. So to finalize, we have selected some key messages that are more important to mention today in the next figure. They have, for example, that tailored finance is really essential because the financial instruments are aligned with their maturity from grants and venture capital to carbon performance linked finance. The government leadership is really important because it provides this consistent regulation and targeted support, particularly for micro, small, medium enterprises that need this support for climate finance, including the bioeconomy growth. They have to be context specific because they reflect the geographic and technological realities, strengthening human and institutional capacity. And there are more emerging instruments like green bonds, sustainability-linked loans and carbon credits that they could scale and should scale with performance benchmarks and global cooperation. I would just like to finish with some 3 key issues. I think that all these financial instruments need to be clean, transparent, and inclusive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this roadshow, much appreciated. And without further ado, I would just like to invite Francis to share with us some highlights from the next chapter on policies, institutions, governance, and international cooperation. Francis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And I'd like to thank my co-authors and contributing authors, and especially the UNEP team for their guidance during the past months. So in the first diagram, in the next slide, I like to show this framing and context. Basically, bioeconomy strategies have been developed by quite a few countries. I think by now 50 or more countries, and a few regions, particularly the EU and East Africa. But it's important to realize that these strategies are covering the priorities of those countries and regions, and not necessarily focused on climate mitigation and adaptation. So in our analysis, we put the climate lens on bioeconomy, and there are nevertheless certain principles of bioeconomy that come through when you look at relevant policies and governance mechanisms. And it starts with these let's call them visions of bioeconomy. different types of stakeholders involved that governments and multilateral actors have to deal with, and technology or resources or ecology or some combination of them. And then the appropriate policies and institutions, well, these actually, if we put the climate lens on them, then there's a growing effort to think about adaptation as well as mitigation and other SDGs. So getting more value or getting synergies and co-benefits. And then in this last part, we think about the deployment and implementation, and I'll mention a little bit about some of the partnerships and collaboration platforms that have developed. So in the next slide, I like to show this idea of system transformation. So when we talk about bioeconomy and bio-based technologies, it's a bit different than let's say renewables and transport and buildings, where you're emphasizing, you know, mostly energy substitution or other types of substitution. Here there's more of a transformation aspect because we're dealing with resources and land, agriculture, forestry, and so forth. And so we look for this transformative effect, and it comes through these sort of basic principles of bioeconomy, because it's not enough to just be bio-based. As Debbie noted in her talk on the feasibility chapter, traditional biomass and subsistence agriculture, these are not sustainable either because of their low productivity. So we're looking to move out of both the high input systems that have fossil fuels, but also these low input, low productivity systems, moving to add more value, cross-cutting over different sectors, and innovation. And so that's the sort of real driving concept of bioeconomy. It's this transformative effect, not just getting more efficient, but really doing things quite differently. And so how can we extract climate mitigation and adaptation benefits from that? That's really the question for policy design. So in the next segment here, I just like to mention some of these global institutions, because the report is at this global level. However, if you read the report, you will find some particular examples we used from countries and regions as well. But in this overview, I'm focusing on the global aspect. So what I'd like to point out is that in recent years, a number of organizations and institutions have really taken hold of bioeconomy leadership. Particularly, I would say the FAO, but also there's work going on at UNCTAD. There is an important advisory council, the International Advisory Council on the Global Bioeconomy, which runs the bioeconomy summits that are occurring every 2 years. There's the International Bioeconomy Forum. And if you look at the title of in the top row here, basically dividing these in our discussion and analysis into economic and market governance, knowledge governance, informational governance, and commitment and agenda setting. And with informational governance, it's a little bit different than knowledge governance in that it's dealing with particular mechanisms like certification and standardization, whereas knowledge governance tends to be more broad and maybe connecting to other key goals and priorities. And what's interesting, looking at the last column on the right, is that bioeconomy cuts across really the 3 Rio Conventions, and if it's done really well, it can make a contribution to all the goals of all 3 conventions, and that's unusual. This is something that you don't find in most of the energy sectors and energy transitions and the other sectors. So there is a great opportunity here. I also like to mention that the G20 has been particularly active, starting with the Brazilian initiative last year. In the next slide, then, what I'd like to show is just to try to summarize then what are these drivers, what have we discovered are the priorities. So this idea of systemic approach. And with a systemic approach, you recognize some of these non-linearities, and not just breaking down each component and focusing on that, but recognizing systemic risk that can be associated with impacts, looking at the land use changes over time, and the fact that our approach to bioeconomy occurs in a dynamic context, because with climate change, we have impacts on the productivity of land, we have impacts on resource productivity and in agriculture and forestry. So the other aspect of this is that it's multi-level. So we have to connect between local, national, regional, and global. And this is what makes it a bit more complex than other technologies if we compare to renewable technologies, for example, which are somewhat more straightforward. Another aspect is this idea of inclusiveness and participation, and because bioeconomy can bring value added to local communities, that there are great benefits there, but there are also risks in terms of how to reflect local priorities. And so this is a particularly important component, and related actually to the next one, which is the safeguards when you're working in dealing with biodiversity rich areas, because there are ways to use biodiversity sustainably, but of course biodiversity can also be exploited unsustainably. So how to be clear about these safeguards. Land tenure and legal frameworks important, because in this report we mostly focus on the land-based bioeconomy. And then this idea that of standards and certification, which has been ongoing for a long time. It started with bioenergy many years ago, and now dealing more broadly with bio-based resources, such as through the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials or through the International Standards Organization. Nature-based solutions have come on as quite significant, especially in soils, ecosystem restoration. And that's why bio-based technologies, of course, are just as much about resources as they are about technology. And so bringing these sustainability frameworks into the strategies, and as I was saying earlier, how we can get this climate lens for adaptation and mitigation better recognized in terms of reaching the potential for bio-based technologies. And then, as I summarized previously, these international initiatives, there has been quite a decent amount of progress, but how to align these efforts and promote best practice and really scale up and provide financing. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Francis, for sharing these insights from the chapter with us. Much appreciated. So without further ado, I would like to invite Alex to take the floor and share some insights from the regional chapter focusing on Latin America and Caribbean. So please, Alex, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and hello everyone. Greetings from the South America, here from the Patagonia, and I would like to talk about what is the main findings from the Latin America and the Caribbean. And I would like to say thank you for UNED for that kind of invitation, and all the contributing authors and my rest of the colleagues, because the previous chapter has been a very good umbrella in order to talk what is going on and what happened in Latin America. The next slide, please. The next slide. Yes, Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a lot of advantage for that. For example, we have a natural capital baseline because we have an over 40% of the global biodiversity, and we have the major biomass and freshwater stocks and so on. So we have a core assets of the biodiversity that is a very, very good and base in order to deploy on the bioeconomy strategies. The second one is that Latin American biological wealth, and we have development gaps. In order to develop that kind of technologies, we need to try to be inclusive. We have the options to move and tackle that inequality, because on too many and too many actions has been deployed into the local community. So it's a very good and chance in order to be inclusive, to promote the local communities and so on. And another advantage for the Latin America and the Caribbean, and that kind of technologies can be integrated into the NDCs. The NDCs for mitigation is easier to introduce on them, and it are interesting technologies in order to be attractive for the investment and so on. And finally, the deployment of that kind of technologies can strengthen the different kind of industrial sectors like sustainable forestry, agro-industry, fisheries, aquaculture, biotech, and so on. So there in the table, just to surprise you, and right now the problem with Latin America, we have a lot of the actions and different projects in different kind of countries in Central America, in South America, and so on. And there in the table you can see in the chapter, and too many projects in different kind of countries. This is just a brief for you that we have, and right now we are working on. The problem is we have a lot of technologies dispersed in different kind of areas, and we need to try to put in orders in order to try to create clusters and use the proper definition in order to try to get a common language and in order to use the bioeconomy. The next slide, please. In Latin America and Caribbean, what we need a policy and policy integration in order to show the market signals. The idea is to try to introduce international bioeconomy strategies. For example, we have Costa Rica and Brazil, and we have the first experience introducing the bioeconomy into the national strategies, and we need innovation, including the rural inclusion and so on. A very good example in Brazil, the Renova Bio, for example, life cycle and carbon intensity, and in that case, that kind of approach is a very good chance in order to put that kind of advantage into the global carbon markets inside the Article 6 and for the Conference of Parties. And two, we have a very good advantage in order to develop a sub-regional specialization to scale up. For example, in the southern cone, we have a large scale and sugarcane, soy systems, fuel oil, and so on. In the Andes and Central America, we have a smallholder forestry. In Chile, we have a certification of the forestry. In Ecuador and Peru, we have a robust fisheries and agricultural activities and working with the coastal communities. There in the table, you can see how different kind of actions has been classified in the 4 kind of technologies that we are talking throughout the chapter, and it's easy to classify them, and it's easy to try to show what is the strength in order to try to carbon capture, mitigation, in order to use that kind of technologies for the future markets according to Article 6 in the Conference of Parties. Next slide. So we have climate-related biobased technologies. And what is the challenge? Institution and platforms. Here we have Embrapa, INTA, INFAP in different kind of countries, but it's not this very similar structure, but we have institution, we need more institution, and we need that kind of institution in order to mobilize the finance, because finally the transfer, the funding for the investment for private sector, public sector, international organization needs that kind of institution in order to drive the investment to the local communities. There you can see, for example, different kind of technologies with different kind of regulations and research and development needs. The next slide, please. The next slide, yes. And what is the challenge? Inclusion standards. We need yes, and I don't have more time. And we need them to be inclusive. We need to include indigenous and local knowledge. The second one is trying to create the bio value change in order to strengthen the kind of economy and move ahead in the measure and reporting and verification in order to create different kind of certifications to put all that kind of products into the market and try to put in the bottom line to be inclusive in bioeconomy and promoting the actions into the local and rural areas in order to alleviate the poverty, in order to and tackle the inequity. What is the predictive actions? Embed the bioeconomy into the climate goals and the scale up. Some specific projects that right now are into the territory 3 and deploy the digital MRV and certification, and finally trying to use them in order to mobilize the finance. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. So that's the schema. We have the assets, natural capital. We have a lot of natural resources that we can to protect. We have the indigenous local knowledge. We can use them, and that really works. And we can include the human capitals and research and development in the specific areas according of the different kind of geographies. The second one is move to the sectoral entry points, developing different kind of areas, agroforestry, forestry, blue economy, biorefineries, biobased materials. And finally, we need to try to move to enables, policy, institutions, regulations, finance, and finally, MRB. And that's the idea. Three kind of pillars, we can get different kind of markets, and we can put the products in different markets in order to be more attractive for different kind of markets and different kind of finance, indeed, internationally. The next slide, please. And what is the highlights? One, and all countries needs to define specifically the context-specific pathways, because we have different kind of natural resources and landscapes. Central America is completely different of the Andeans or the Southern Cone and so on. Two, we have a high potential and we need to reduce the bottlenecks. Three, we need a strategic nexus, because the agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and biotech is very well connected between them. So the bioeconomy needs to try to cross-link between different kind of industrial areas. Four, we need to align that kind of projects with the NDCs, like a tool for the mitigation activities. And five, and trying to be the inclusion is non-negotiable, because we need to include the local and rural and knowledge and people living there. And finally, we need to move on regional cooperation in order to coordinate the standards for the same kind of products, and in order to coordinate the MRB, and finally the coordinate the common finance in order to deploy that kind of technology through the whole Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much, and I apologize for how fast I talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for your presentation of the findings from the regional chapter, and thank you to all of the presenters here today. I know the chapters are so rich on information, and it's difficult to condense it into a short intervention here. So I would encourage all of our participants to really take a closer look at the report and all the chapters available through this QR code that you can see on the screen now. So with this, I would actually like to invite all of our presenters of the chapters to turn on your cameras, and we will move to a short Q&A question. We've received a number of questions. We won't have time to go through all of them, but I would like to start out here with a question I have for the finance and investment chapter. So this is for you, Rocio. There is a question here on which bio-based technologies should be prioritized for financing through tools like green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and carbon credits. So this was a question for you, Rocio, and I invite you to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I think the focus should be on, so of course it will depend on which part of the world you are. As I mentioned also in the presentation, we have to consider the geographical context. And as it was mentioned in different presentations as well, because the resources are going to be different from one region to another. The technologies are easier, let's say, to adapt. So this type of financial investment should be looking really at the technologies that are in place. For instance, some of them are easier, let's say, to take on, like sustainable agriculture, even the use of advanced bioenergy with the use, of course, of biomass, and even some of the support for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So I would say the technologies would have to be the ones that can be supported with maybe less investment, such as, for example, some carbon credits or some green bonds, and that will support also the examples, let's say, for larger investments, particularly if they come from the private sector. But I would say that with blended finance, like combining the private and the public sector, it will be possible to support, as we saw some of the examples, technologies that are that require larger investment, like BECS, for instance. But again, depending on the region where the proposal of the investment is, I would say that maybe this scaling up has to go hand in hand with also the different type of financial mechanisms. I would say also just one last point. It was really surprising to see how much crowdfunding is growing in this area as well. And crowdfunding could be also the support for smaller communities, smaller companies that could be, again, demonstrate that it is possible to do it if more individuals and other financial investors can see the potential of these smaller technologies. For example, bioplastics. We've seen several cases of smaller companies doing this and reaching out for this crowdfunding. But again, these are smaller investments than the larger technologies and that require these bigger investments.
Thank you for that elaborate answer, Rocio. So may I turn to you, Francis, with a next question we have received. There's a question here if you can explain more about how international cooperation and global partnerships such as the G20 can support the scaling of bio-based technologies, and how could these platforms help achieve goals, climate goals?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when bioeconomy really got going, 10 or 15 years ago, it was very national. You might even call it nationalistic. But the development in recent years has recognized that there's such an important role because in a given region, taking advantage of, let's say, the comparative advantages of bioeconomy, because the resource base of different countries is so different. So through the G20, through some of the UN-led platforms, particularly the FAO, you can highlight best practice and maybe give some guidance on how different countries and regions can prioritize. Because if everyone tries to do everything, it's extremely inefficient and it will fail. So what we really want is to move towards best practice, that is to say, the most effective and efficient use of land and biomass, and through the multilateral mechanisms, and particularly through certain channels of technology transfer and technology cooperation, but also resource cooperation or cooperation on standards and sustainability certification. All of this helps to give investors a bit more certainty and helps to create a sense of how to pursue bioeconomy goals in a way that we can get the mitigation and adaptation benefits. So I think putting that lens on there is something that's different compared to 10 or 15 years ago when bioeconomy had its own separate area. So that's how I think the contribution can come.
Thank you very much for that. I will move to Debbie and Elizabeth with a question. In your presentation, you highlight that waste and residue-based technologies such as biogas, briquettes, and second-generation ethanol are especially effective in creating synergies across mitigation, adaptation, and sustainable development. Could you elaborate on factors that enable these synergies?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think in part to minimize the different trade-offs between land and resource competition, we have the rights of indigenous peoples and different participatory structures. As I mentioned earlier, a lot also depends on the scale, but when we talk about, for example, the case of briquettes, we're really talking about an issue of energy poverty. So the synergy comes in that you're substituting different fuel sources, and even though it might not necessarily be CO2, there are different air particulates, for example, that contribute to indoor air pollution, but then also that when you reduce energy poverty, these families or communities are less vulnerable to climate impacts. So in some of these cases is how does the bioeconomy work at the rural level?
Thank you very much, Debbie. So I now have received a question perhaps for you to address, Joni. You received a question on which bioenergy processes you consider most adaptable for developing countries that are in the early stages of implementing bioeconomy frameworks. So,
Thank you.
which technologies? Yes, you got the question.
Yes, I already get. So basically, thank you, sir. So basically, this is very important for developing country. The carbon dioxide removal is 10 technologies referred in the report. As you can see, I already mentioned before, the most affordable cost is soil carbon sequestration. Basically, this is just like the organic fertilizer. This is simple thing. You use the waste from the cow dung. You use this is ancient already technology, and also biogas. So this is how from the waste from the, and also the biomass residue, and you combine with the urine of the goat or urine of the cow, and then this is to make the more maturity for the making the organic fertilizer. This is the most cheapest and available to everybody at almost no cost, because this is considered waste. However, this is very volatile. That means the emission directly released to the atmosphere, so not entirely you carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere, because this is biogenic one, and that's why which is considered the highest value is the BECCS, bioenergy carbon capture and storage, but developing country cost maybe $100 to $200 per ton of CO2 removal. This is still impossible. That's why many carbon market people now saying, because not everybody able to afford for the BECCS, but also the soil carbon sequestration is too volatile and not long-term storage of the carbon CO2. So they propose biochar is the midpoint. So biochar has if you make it correctly, biochar can remove the CO2 within 30 to 100 years. So this is much better compared with the soil carbon sequestration, and also the cost of biochar is relatively low. To produce biochar, you need 20 to 30 or 40 US dollar at highest per ton of CO2 removal. That's why in terms of the carbon market nowadays, before people very popular with the afforestation, reforestation, but now the carbon market community more appreciate and more willing to purchase on the carbon credit from the biochar. Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Then maybe let's take a last question before we have to close the session. I have one for you here, Alex. In your presentation of the chapter, you highlight the importance of social inclusivity. And could you elaborate a bit on how can we ensure that the bioeconomy strategies and hence potential upscaling of bio-based technologies are socially inclusive?
Yes, thanks for your question, Sarah. Yeah, it's very interesting that when you are doing the screening about it and what kind of technologies has been deployed in Latin America and the Caribbean, and too many of them has been developed by local communities and indigenous people. So indeed, and in some cases in Central America and South America, too many local actions and local projects has been developed by the people living there. So in that case, we have a huge experience working with local communities, but the people is not connected very well that actions with the bioeconomy. So we need to scale up that kind of projects in order to try to strengthen that kind of projects and deploy into the territory, because right now the local communities are working working there in them. The idea is trying to how we can scale up in order to transfer that kind of technology and all the kind of technologies, because finally that kind of technologies are very useful for mitigation, but has very useful for the adaptation as well, providing jobs, providing an increasing, boosting the economy, and so on. So what is the problem in Latin America? And right now we are not connecting the dots. We have too many projects, and that the local communities, and we have local knowledge there, but we are not connecting them. That kind of the projects has part of the bioeconomy as well. And right now, if we understand that kind of projects needs to be the scale up, we are going to be inclusive. We don't need to create more projects. We need to try to see what kind of projects right now are working on and how we can scale up by deploying the right policies and the institution and the finance in order to boost them and transfer that kind of technology through the global south or into the Latin American as well.
Thank you so much for that. And with that, I would actually really like to thank all of you, of course, for your contributions to this launch event, but also, of course, throughout the last many months in coordinating and preparing the chapters that you have led. So thank you very much for that. So before we close finally the event, I'd just like to mention that the report is made available on the UNEP CCC website, and also will be soon at the CTCN and the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee website, TT-Clear. So thank you very much again to all of you, not least also to our attendees and all the questions we have received. So now I just have to wish all of you a very pleasant rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.